Okay, hi there.
Hi.
It's
Hello.
Sally here, Sally from Strength to Dance, and I am here today with Zach. Zach from Heal Yourself and Move. We are super excited to be bringing together some regular chats, hopefully, throughout the next foreseeable future. I feel like we've really connected with our love of helping dancers and helping them move a little bit better. So we thought we'd collaborate and then we can increase our scope and reach for all of you dancers out there. So
Couldn't
hello,
have said
Zach.
that better. Hello there, Sally. I think that was a wonderful introduction, and I thought, am I at the BBC here? And then I had to check, and I realised that they wouldn't have that backdrop. In fact,
No, they wouldn't have this backdrop.
oh, maybe now. Anyway, so yeah, that's good backdrop there. So yeah, I'm really excited to be here. It's been really great having these chats, and ever since we first, I think, caught up last year, and just going back and forth, trying to work out, in a sense, what the hell each of us are doing, but knowing there was something, intriguing there. And my experience chatting with you is that I haven't. There seemed to be quite a little bit of a similarity in some of the ways you're looking at stuff, obviously from a very different perspective as well. But and I hadn't experienced that before, and I think it's something that we both sort of been chatting about. Is that really interested in sort of finding out what we're doing, and then but B also I guess working to maybe change perspectives on how dancers particularly can train. And how perhaps there's new concepts that we've been sort of working on that we can come together on in the future, but also just even this conversation, opening stuff up, cracking stuff open a little about maybe what can be sort of looked at or changed in perspective to help dancers training, because there's a lot of I think potentially out there at the moment for that to change, and for dancers to get really exciting results without having to I guess hurt their bodies, and I think obviously there's that out there. Yeah,
Absolutely. I mean, I know myself when we met up, it's probably about a year ago, I think.
Yeah.
And we were having a discussion about our methods that we're using, and it was very exciting just to have the connection about wanting to help dancers out there, and also having that very similar, I think, view on how movement should be effortless and we should be feeling good in our bodies. And also that maybe some of the things that we did when we were younger, dancing, don't need to be the case now. And that luckily, I think, as science evolves and we learn new things about the body, we understand that maybe some of the things that we went through when we were younger and that may have been painful or not given us the results we wanted, don't need to be in common day practice. And there are things that can get us quicker results that are kinder to our body. So yeah, that was really, really exciting. And I know together we've been trying to hook up a couple of times this year, and COVID has kind of got in the way.
Exactly, because Zoom had COVID at one stage as well, so that was
And I was just endlessly having to cancel my trips to come and visit you.
Oh yeah, totally. Because that was right. You had to, you still haven't been able to see Harry Potter and the Cursed Child yet. That's the curse. It
is a curse. My Harry Potter tickets keep on getting moved, and my visits to your studio keep on getting moved.
Well, maybe I've just got to come to Sydney now. I think I need a holiday, so let's do that. But yeah, I think so. What you were saying a little bit earlier, just as a little bit of a proposal for today, even to chat on, saying about maybe a little bit of a discovery of how we both sort of came to be working this way.
Yes, absolutely. Because I think we've probably had, again, not identical, but a similar journey. And this is what's brought us to this place, and also why we're so passionate about this arena as well. Because, let's be real, if we want to be living in a huge house in Sydney and not working in dance therapy, I would be in IT.
There's got to be a way of blending the two. I'm all about that synthesis, Silicon Valley is somatic
Yeah,
something or other.
something like that.
No, I need that needs work.
Yeah.
But yeah, so do you want to start it off? You know, how was it that
Okay.
you
So,
sort
I
of,
mean, I'm sure some people know that I already know up here in Sydney, but my background came through dance training. So, like many people, I had the normal start at about 5 years old. I actually started doing Scottish dancing. I've got like pictures of me about 5 years old doing that. Then went
you
into
can raise your arms in that one, can't you? Scottish
can
dancing.
raise your arms. In fact,
Yeah,
they
yeah.
cannot. Yeah.
Whoa.
So there's pictures of me in a little kilt, and then I moved over to doing some dancing. It was like a movement dancing in my village. Again, I'm probably only about 5, and then moved into a dance school in my home city of Nottingham. I was very lucky. The school I was at did a lot of performance work, as in professional performance work. So we have pantomime in the UK. That's a huge thing, and anybody that's watching this from the UK will understand that. So I was.
Panto.
Yeah, panto. So I was able to be working professionally from probably about the age of about 8, I would say.
Really?
Yeah.
In pantos? Wow.
So
Cool.
the whole panto thing is around like a fairy tale theme. So it's like Jack and the Beanstalk, Cinderella, all of that. And each year you have babes. So we used to have a troop of 10, and going from little all the way up to the older girl. And then we do the whole Christmas season. So yeah, it was really good. And we got some other gigs. I did a couple of little Disney gigs, and we got to be the choir for musical theatre productions and things. And then I actually went to university at normal age, so 18, did physiotherapy then, just because I was obsessed with the body, biology, anatomy, physiology. And truth be told, wasn't actually that much in love with physio itself. I just was in love with the human body. And then when I graduated, I decided that was not what I wanted to be doing. I still love dancing, and all I wanted to do was dance. And so auditioned in London and got work. I was very lucky, got my first job straight away, and ended up working for Princess Cruises. And went off around the Caribbean dancing and got paid for it. And I was just like, wow, I can't believe this. This is just amazing. Yeah, and then I carried on dancing. So I sort of worked in cabaret, did a couple of short commercial jobs, constantly auditioning for musical theatre in London, moved down to London. And then, had a horrible injury in an audition. So that was for a pop tour with a female pop band. So it was like my ultimate dream job. And yeah, had an accident, knew I'd hurt my knee. Had the usual, got misdiagnosed at hospital because I'm hypermobile. So they didn't necessarily recognise that I had snapped my ACL. And then I carried on dancing for like another year and a half with a ruptured ACL. And I think at this time just didn't have access at that period for myself for a good support network. So dance videos where I was living in Nottingham at that time didn't exist. Even the physios I did see were just sports, so they didn't understand dancing. They didn't understand what I needed to get back to work. I did go back to work. I did more dance jobs, worked in theme parks, even did a stint as a magician's assistant dancer on a gig. But my knee just kept on giving way. And then eventually I had it operated on. So I had a hamstring graft, if any of you ACL friends are out there. Again, rehab wasn't amazing, and I re-snapped it. So re-ruptured it, had to go back in again and get a meniscal repair. And then I was like, okay, well, I'm not really dancing again then. And I think I was sort of late 20s at this point.
Right.
And I think sort of at that age, it's sort of like, right, okay, well, I'm going to need a couple of years of rehab now, which then takes me into my early 30s. And do I really want to then be trying to crack into the London musical theatre market again? It's hard. I mean, you know, you have to audition. And it's all about who you know and getting your face seen many times. So then I went back into physio, and actually got a job very quickly at my local hospital. And then, yes, and then did physio, and then sort of had a big emotional turmoil of, this isn't what I want to be doing. I still want to be performing. And I think when it's not your decision to stop, you're not prepared for it, and it just seems desperately unfair. And it's what if this had happened, or what if that had happened? And yeah, so I was dealing a lot with that kind of psychological side of things. And I came out then to Australia, and people were saying, why don't you treat dancers? And at the time I was like, I don't think I can, actually. I think I'm too jealous. I don't want to be helping somebody at this time to be doing something that I want to be doing. So it was hard. And then, you know, I'm still doing classes and everything. And then I ended up working with Lisa Howell at Perfect Form Physio. And then I was probably with her for about 11 and a half years. And over that time, just really grew to love helping dancers. And that I think I'd only been there about 6 months, and I was like, yes. And then I'd set up some lecturing on physical fitness for dancers. And I think as well, even still going to classes myself and seeing what warm-ups look like, I was like, very similar to the warm-ups I was doing when I was 16, 17, 18. So not that much had changed. And because I'd working as well in the fitness industry, so much research and exciting information was coming through from there that I sort of felt it's a bit, there seems to be a gap here within the dance industry. So I was just, right, I want to get on board and create like good personal training information for dancers, so that they're not necessarily just sitting in the gym pushing things, but they're doing things that are dynamic, designed for how they perform on stage. So trying to match all the work and learning I'd been doing with how I could help dancers. And then that journey has just been continuing.
Fantastic. And it's so interesting that, you know, that journey of all those information, I guess, and all that experience coming together. And also how I can see some real parallels with my experience in so many things you're sort of collecting along the way that then become the actual, you know, and suddenly it makes sense. It's the reason you're doing it at that stage. But I love that I guess that thing will, and I say I love it, sorry, I'm saying I love that you got injured. That doesn't make any sense. What I'm saying is, I love that, you know, because no, what I meant to say was, it's very similar to, I can see with what happened with my training, with the injury, unable to do that, and feeling it's being taken from you, and not wanting to have that moment. And then also, I had a very similar experience getting in when I was teaching rehab, Pilates and everything like that. Wanting still to be moving and dancing, and then part of, I guess, me developing what I've been working on is, in almost a sense, frustration. That frustration of not being able to do it myself as much as I wanted to. So then working out finding a way to do it. But with my next experience, like I started ballet at 8, and I did that for sort of many years, and then it was the full kind of suburban ballet school thing with a wonderful teacher, Lorraine Blackburn, and so it was you know, ballet, jazz, tap, though the last two which I was terrible at, and then sort of got into ballet and really loved. I wasn't very good at sport, I wasn't good at anything along those lines, pretty uncoordinated, but what I found with ballet was that, you know, you could express yourself, you could have, you could find sort of athleticism, but then there was a story, and, you know, there was sort of the romance of the music and all that kind of stuff involved. And, you know, and so for me, I thought it was just, you know, wonderful. And so I never had any I never really had any doubts about it when I was doing it. Not I had doubts about myself as my ability to dance, but not to do to that. I guess choosing to do it, you get teased a bit or whatever. It was just a bit unusual in Australia at that time, I guess, for boys doing ballet. But I was just like, no, this is just a lot of fun, and it's also the teachers are like, you get encouraged as a young boy there. But then, I went into a full-time school dance world, and then it was almost like didn't say I wanted to be a professional dancer necessarily, but it was just more like I'll just sort of continue, and the opportunities kept sort of coming up. So I went to sort of Australian Ballet School, and that was when that moment it's like, I think at dance for Australian Ballet School full-time trainer, I was like, now I want to do it, and that was when I guess I really started to come up against my body's limitations, and you really start to see when you're training full-time that there seems to be an edge to what your talent can do, and then you can see how talented other people are apparently, and then there's a lot of comparison. I remember that starting to competition and feelings of inadequacy, or who you're better than, or and all that kind of stuff. And less, I've started to lose, I guess, that initial, just what we're doing it for was just loving dancing and loving the expression and feeling of it. And then it became, okay, you've got to get your body in the right shape. It's got to look right. And then also that you're starting to get that fear and worry about injury. And I really remember that starting to creep in. And then just, it never leaves you as a dancer, because it's whatever you're doing, it's always like, what have I done? What's that? Ooh. And I just, all these things the whole time. And it's almost like, that sword hanging over your head. Is this the thing? Is this going to be the thing that finishes things for you? And even as a very young dancer, you're really aware of those things, because your body that's what it's there for, to dance in that sense. So I remember going and doing at the time a lot of training, like early with it was Andrew Baxter, doing Pilates with him, and I was really trying to work out what I could do to keep my body in conditioning. He was a wonderful teacher, and try and prepare it, for what I had to do. And it was interesting. I remember getting a lot of strength in Pilates and all this kind of stuff, but then it was this thing of, hang on, I'm not seeing the link into my technique. I'm not seeing the direct change within it, even though I know I'm stronger. I'm doing these it seems like these things I'm doing should be having that effect, and yet then they're not. And it's not that, it's not that they're not really good, and it was expertly and wonderfully taught and everything like that. It's not that at all. It's just that I couldn't make the link into that technical improvement. And then it seemed like whatever I was getting from teachers and everything like that, it was all, and this is something I guess thought about more and more, it's getting the what of what the problem is, of what the issue is, but not the specific how for you to fix it. And I remember that was kind of, I didn't sort of formulate it by that at the time, but I was like, this is strange, like I'm working so hard, and everyone's going, you work really hard. Gee, you work hard. And then I'd be working, and I'd just work harder, and things would get further and further away, and I was just like, what's going on? And then you'd see other people that were naturals, apparently, they just weren't putting in what I was putting in,
Yeah.
And yet they just kept getting better and better and better. And I was just like, this is killing me,
Yeah.
And then I'd get injured, and they just like, just saying, I was like, what is going on? And then you start to think, I start to remember, well, there's a ceiling, there's a limit.
Yes.
To your talent, to your ability. And it's kind of like, that's when you start, I guess, diminishing your dream of what you could do, because it's kind of the reality just keeps hitting you in the face and going, well, you can't do it, And so I remember that. And I went through Australian Ballet School, but I remember that feeling of limitation hitting, and then staying there, and then went into sort of Queensland Ballet. I was there for a couple of years, but that was it as far as it was like the moment where I was going to be able to take off. The injuries or whatever at certain key points, and a lack of getting that real breakthroughs meant that I didn't find that progression, and I was really disappointing. And then I went from there, went to some contemporary dance, expressions dance company, and then after that, I found, okay, well, I found for me, it was like contemporary dance. I could see that, you know, I thought, oh, well, with classical ballet, the opportunity which I wanted to really express myself within it, the characters, the roles, and everything. I was like, I'm never going to get now. When you're going, I'm not going to get beyond sort of, you know, featured peasant. I'm just like, I'm out of here, you know. I'm out of here. It's like, give me something that I can actually throw my body into, because I really have, you know, obviously I had good attack, you know, good attack, which also means you're bashing it, you're like a bullet a gate, and all these kind of things are just like whoo, at it. And so, like, and the refinement aspect of ballet kind of missed me entirely, you know. So, but as a enthusiastic peasant / gypsy, you know, unbeatable. You know, but and so, like, I think that intensity was able to translate much better into sort of contemporary dance stuff. But at the same time, was got to me was that it was something still missing. It was something there was things I hadn't found out how to, I guess, dance the way that I wanted to dance, and I wasn't, and then that was the things always sort of played me. I wasn't the things I was, and then I could see I was doing Pilates, I'm doing yoga, I'm doing all this conditioning, I'm doing this fitness stuff. But what I wanted to do it for was expression, pure expression, you know.
Yeah.
And I hadn't, and because my body shape, I always say, you know, for a ballet dancer, you've got a great body for rugby, which is what you want to hear, basically. And so I just didn't have I wasn't able to get the expression within those forms, also within ballet, that I thought I had. And the same thing to some extent with the contemporary dance stuff that I was doing. So I just kept searching for it. And then that's, for me, when I stopped doing dance entirely, started doing a lot of martial arts and then somatic stuff as well. And I got some wonderful teachers, Wendy Smith, Bruce Hildebrand, and Amber Gray and Continue, and started looking at a lot of different somatic methods while doing martial arts, and then I started doing dance and choreography again. And I started to find, it was almost like there wasn't one answer, but as I started to apply a lot of different systems simultaneously, it was almost like just by matching it together in a way, like sort of system mashup. It was like they started to start talking to each other, and it was this weird thing, like stuff that I'd never been able to do. And I go, well, what if I'm trying to do this, if I apply this bit from here and just do it and just change it slightly, and suddenly like, whoa, oh. I was like, oh, okay. And then what about if I do this? And it was almost like, then I started to see, and it became, for the first time since I'd probably even started dancing, that kind of wonder came back. It was probably about 2012. I was like, this is possible again, you know? And it was almost like the ceiling that had come down. You're like, I'm only going, and then that feeling when you're down, I'm tight, I'm sore, I'm stiff. That's it. And I realized that once you start to free it up, start to find fluidity and flow in the body, a lot of the limitations that you're feeling, what I started to identify was actually caused by all the tension I was putting into it, all the and the resistance I was creating by trying to go, I will get through this no matter what, and it wasn't actually doing it. And then when I started to do so much less, as I was saying before, and so, and then there was something sort of switched. I was going, well, instead of putting all this exercise and all this stuff I'm doing first as the thing that needs to be done before I'm allowed to go and dance. I'll start doing the dance stuff first and see what's needed within it, and then only bring stuff in. And it was kind of like, okay, and started looking at ballet or contemporary dance or martial arts or whatever, highly complex, movement, dynamic movement. That's kind of the highest, it's a higher level of understanding for your body and everything than it is doing specific exercise. So it's like, well, what if I start and work out that first, what needs to happen, and then start to almost like, so a lot of the stuff that I was looking at is developing soon now, I guess, is looking at what's specifically getting in the way of doing that thing right now. What's happening? What is it right now? What's happening right now? Before you go, because often what I've experienced and what people, they'll go, well, I don't have a strong core, well, it's my core, and it's just like, and that's your balance. say, for instance, balance on demi-point. And I was talking about it's the core. And so, okay, great. Well, what are you doing? So I'm doing planks and sit-ups to strengthen. It's like, that's not a balance on demi-point. That's a completely different thing. And then if you look, and then across the board, like I've got my jumps, I need to improve my jumps. So what are you doing to improve it? It's like, well, I'm doing squats. It's like, but that's your jumping involves the whole. So, and then sort of looking at that from that perspective, and then and then bringing that into my own training and everything like that. And so it was really interesting to see that. So for me to realize, first of all, so much of my training had been so much extra work.
Yes.
Before I, was doing that, and then realizing that, if we can start with that and then find as close as possible to what that is, that's what's needed, from my perspective. And that's such an interesting thing. So that's kind of how, I guess, in a roundabout way.
Yeah.
But, that was right. Sorry, the injury for me, I did get an injury. I got a serious head injury when I was in my early 20s. I had like a skull fracture and everything like that, and basically acquired brain injury. It took me a long time. So I couldn't dance at all for a long time. So that was the interesting thing for me, like with your knee. What I found was just could not do the things at all. And so I had to find a different way of doing it. Like, so I still want to move. I still want to do stuff. I can't do it like that. My balance was affected. It took me a few years to get that back. So I had to actually find different systems and ways of doing it to be able to come through. Is that a similar thing what you found? Eventually I'm interested with your knee. Have you found some things that...
I think, I suppose, with my knee, having re-ruptured it again, and then I actually ruptured my other one as well, playing volleyball. So that's both of my knees. But I think for me, I desperately wanted to carry on moving without surgery. So I personally didn't view my surgery as being very successful. I think really in hindsight, any kind of surgery you have is about the rehab or the prehab. So what have you done before you go under the knife, and what do you do afterwards? And the surgery obviously is the nuts and bolts part of it, but it's really how well are you moving mechanically before and after, and what health is your tissue in before and after. That has a really big influence. But it took me, I then got heavily into, at that time, something called the Gray Institute, which is run by a guy called Gary Gray, who's a physical therapist in America. And he's termed the godfather of function in our world, because he sort of really, that's when I was first looking at what's called on-ground function. So the difference between how all your muscles work from what we learn, as in on the bed. The quads will extend the knee, and it's all open chain function, to actual what you would call real function, which is you standing on your feet and moving around, and it's quite different. And so I got heavily into that and bought everything I could of his, and I still love the Gray Institute now. I think they're groundbreaking. And then more recently, as in about 6 years ago, I then trained with Anatomy in Motion, and they do a treatment approach called the flow motion model, which is all gait based, and that's the same. So all the people I follow now with movement are all to do with gravity ground. You are upright on your feet, and we're looking at how the bones move around and how the muscles and fascia react to that. And I think this is what we were loving when we met up for our coffee, was that it has this very similar approach of what you would call functional movement.
And that's the interesting thing of going that so much of what we're looking at is when it's open chain.
Yes.
And not under the conditions we were saying before, of what it's actually being required to do, which is ground based, like that.
Yes. I think this always it can be a little bit of in my opinion, a bit, so you would have like regular motion, which is like walking, running, jumping, climbing. Dancing obviously does have movements that are at the very far end of the spectrum. So let's say you're looking at a very high leg elevation or penché, or even things like splits. They're not everyday functional movements that you need to be getting from A to B. Or we're looking back at how man developed and evolved. Those movements aren't required.
Giant jetty for mankind.
Saber-toothed tiger, and I got it.
Exactly.
And also things that, you know, like moving in heels, so in chorus heels or tap shoes, or to even
Taven didn't have them.
I mean, it's the most bizarre concept, dancing in point shoes. But so we have to have that. Once you get your grounded normal movement sorted, then you can sort of increase the spectrum and start to look at the nuances that are involved with all the dance genres that we look at. Getting those extreme end of ranges and feeling comfortable there and getting the right control in those end ranges as well. But I think, I think for me, finding the Gray Institute and doing all of this three-dimensional training was absolutely it was like an epiphany for me, and got me working again and got my feet and hips talking to each other so that my knee was safe. And then it helped me think, wow, okay, yeah, I really wasn't very stable. I am actually hypermobile, and nobody had really ever pointed that out. And, you know, gone through all of this dancing, not knowing any of this, and just forcing myself into positions, gripping into positions, doing a kick as a whack, as opposed to letting it sort of almost float up into the air. And so, yeah, like you were saying, everything was just more. I want to get my leaps higher, it's more. I want to get my kicks higher, it's more. And then doing exercises that don't translate because the specificity isn't there. And although I do, you know, I spend a lot of time in the Pilates world, I really, even when I'm lecturing with teacher training, it's like, yeah, you may do this, but you have to bring it up onto your feet immediately so that the body knows what to do with that you have just done. Because lying on your side doing clams has literally no connection or relevance to your brain on then how to stabilize your pelvis on one leg.
Isn't that such a great point?
Mismatch.
Yeah, such a great point of going. That's what something I really look at as well, is that it's always looking at a before state, doing it, and then what is it actually done. And that's one of the things I get really resonate with what you're saying, is that I always look for, once, you know, we're doing something, has it had an improvement? Have you noticed a change? What is it? And then it's that accountability and responsibility in that moment, and that also, I think, really links it into, it's going to be something you can actually use in your dancing, your technical improvement, because that becomes realization based rather than that kind of, it's prescription. You're going, okay, you do that amount of exercises and it's going to equal that. But unless you make the link in your dancing, it doesn't happen. It has to have that neural pathway link. It has to have that new patterning occurrence. Otherwise, it's not. It ain't there. And I think that's it's such an interesting one, because, you know, from my experience with my training is that we do take on all these things. I'm going to do this, and this, and then there isn't a direct relationship to it. So then they become two separate worlds, and they never. And then it becomes a mystery to you as a dancer. It's just like, I don't know. You don't know why it's happening when it goes wrong. You don't know what to do, fix it, and then and once again, it's all this time spent trying to find out. When just simply making those connections. I was really interested in what you were saying with that work when you were in the Gray stuff. Once you created that sort of ground-based stuff for your body, and even those realization that you were hypermobile and those kind of things, did you find that you were no longer putting the stress on you found a different relationship to your knees, like a different way of moving them?
Yes, I mean, in this learning journey that I was going on, that's when I was sort of really understanding the concept of the knee being the slave to the foot and the hip. So
Believe as a slave to the hip. Slave to the hip. I love.
So
slave is a slave to the foot and the hip. I love that. Yeah.
Poor
Yeah.
little me in the middle.
Yeah.
Really doesn't have much choice about things, and it all has to do with foot function and hip and pelvic function and how they talk to each other. So how good is that conversation? And again, I think then learning more about the impact of gravity ground reaction forces with movement, having a bit more insight into, again, this sort of specificity that you're talking about. And we talk about specificity, overload and adaptation with strength training, but the specificity being really, well, if you do want to improve your core control, you need to then go, where do you feel your core control is lacking? Is it when you're doing a leg elevation? Is it when you're doing a turn? And so you have to kind of match that core control back in again. And so quite rightly, like you said, yes, doing a plank has its uses, absolutely. But is it going to carry over to you being able to do a third arabesque any better on demi point? No, very much doubt it. Because again, it's a mismatch. The specificity isn't there.
Yeah.
But, you know, from some of the mentors that I work under and follow all the time, I think the biggest thing out there, and this is what I talk about a lot on the channel, is variability. So increasing, as they call, your smorgasbord of choice. So, you know, can you do this? Yes, I can. Can you do it like this? Yes, I can. And even from the Gray Institute, they have something called squatology, where you squat in like 5,000 different positions, because that's how the hip will be happy, and that's how you train your skin, that's how you train your nerves, that's how you train your fascia, by doing 5 million different positions of something. Because if you just do one, that is the one way.
The one thing it knows. And then all these other things are going to come along. You know, it's just like if you only train, it's such a wonderful way of putting that in 5,000 different things, you know. And I had a teacher in the continuum method at Amber Gray. Her, and one of the things that she was saying was that your body or your system, everything, it craves complexity, you know. And if you're not giving it that, you're not allowing it to actually experience what its true potential, you know, which is so much of it is actually exploratory, you know, and adaptive. And as we you know, sometimes so I was talking about this the other day actually to some people I was working with, but this idea of function itself, you know, to go, what is our function? What's going on? What do you want to use that function for? And then then you've got to go, well, then that becomes, you know, it's aspirational, what you're actually doing. You're dancing, you're a hockey player, whatever it is, all these functions. And so functional movement, it's so specific on what you actually desire to do with it. And then if you say within dance, so there's so many things, it's so adaptable, and there's so many things that you can, so many variables, once again, within variability, that actually it's impossible to even you can't get the full amount of it. And so but you can in some ways prepare to be open to that, you know. And I think exactly, if you're just doing one squat one way and then something comes along, that's it, there's your injury.
Yes, it is, absolutely.
5,000. And what interesting, one of the things that I was looking at is the idea of, I guess, that variability.
I mean,
you go.
I was going to say, I mean, if I think back to my own personal injury, which was, the big one was an ACL injury. But again, no amount of lying on my back and doing crunches or 2-minute planks or something would have remotely helped the conversation between my core and my feet. And so, you know, the injury happened. I was jumping into like cut splits after a couple of chaînés, and my ability to rotate through the body wasn't really there. And my second injury was the same. And, you know, that was on sand based. So, but the body, we need to be connecting every single part of the body to every single other part of the body. And although, you know, initially I think the injuries were devastating, and it took me a long time psychologically to get in a place where I was happy again to help. But even now, I mean, I still work with my flow motion model mentor, and we're looking at injuries I had when I was dancing. So we've been again going back and looking at an ankle sprain I had, and that I'd fallen and landed on my head, and how's that affected how my skull moves, and then how that affects my shoulder. And so then again, that now makes my balance a bit better now. And so I think, you know, it's lovely to think you can still be developing, and these injuries can make you stronger, and you can still be dancing for as long as you want to.
Absolutely. And it's just, and I think that's so inspiring to hear as well. That, and it's also, I love that, even going back, because I've also gone back to some old injuries as well, and to find that there's ways to be able to, you know, things that, because I remember running on the beach, did my ITB, ran my knee, and I went to sports doctors, and they, you know, you had arthritis, that word, and you know, there was no real diagnosis of it. And then basically just through doing a lot of release work around it, connected work, so just so super tight, you know, and I was knee was just constantly under pressure. And so even just bending it at all, I'd be limp, all this kind of stuff, and just working, gradually releasing it, feeling better, and then bringing that aspect of freedom into grounded movement patterning, observing where the tension, where the flow stopped, where was it that, you know, and that's what I look at so much, is that where you create flow, you might do it just lying down, and it's so much freer and everything, and then it's gradually going, can you maintain, or what do you need to do to keep that right into the thing you want to do it with? And the minute that the resistance comes back, or the pain comes up, well, that's your point, that you've understood it. Now that's it, that, you know, the whole body understands it's all there, but you're not ready yet. So we go back. It's not going, when you can do 400 of those things, then you're ready. It's not that at all, because then you see, well, you do 400 of them, then you still go and do that thing and you injure yourself again because you haven't.
Absolutely.
And so it's so, I love this, like, that is this concept of, when you're just, you know, just discussing that with you, of the freedom to move being, I guess, there's the first thing, you know, that's what we're creating, the freedom and the range, all that kind of, that's the thing that we want first. Supporting that, and what, rather than, it's whether you're injured or when something's not working technically, going back and going, well, if, you know, I'm wanting this freedom within it, but then I go and create resistance as a thing to try and achieve it. It just doesn't make sense. You know? And so it's so lovely to, I guess, to chat with you on this. So you're looking at the function of dance as that, what's the specific nature of what you're doing? What is that? What is that right now? What is it? And then linking to it, always linking to it, rather than, because that's what I think, that's such an interesting point we're saying, that is, you know, you injured your knee, you're doing planks and sit-ups, because you've got to strengthen your core. And this is what I see with dancers over and over again still. It's like, yeah, you've got to strengthen your core. So doing core work, it's got nothing to do with that thing. You know? And it's just that, and when if you miss it by that much, you miss it by the whole lot. You know? So, fascinating to be, and I think also the great thing about working with this, for me personally, working with dancers, is that you get to really see, because when I was going back to me being frustrated when wanting to dance, just like you were saying, you know, because I was working you know, working Pilates, but I've been wanting to dance, so I'm studying all this somatic and choreographic martial arts stuff, and finding that I had to, as I'm learning it, the only way that was keeping me interested, I had to be showing people that came in these new ways that I was doing, but they weren't dancers at all. So then it was the imperative to be able to go, I'd sort of, how could I get them to take it on? And part of it, without them getting too suspicious or running out of the room. And so you had to kind of make it accessible and quickly accessible, but also in such a way that what I started to see was that they, people that weren't dancers, it was actually dance. When you actually create freedom and flow and ease and enjoyment in the body, you're already dancing. You're making and starting to see them do this. People that weren't dancers, but just these little micro movements and flow occurring, and then go, oh, and that was the thing that was allowing injuries and all sorts of things to in way. It's just like, and that's when I started linking that back into dance and going, dance is just everyone's dancing, in a way, it's just higher level. It's just hard, it's more intensity, but it's like, this in your shoulder.
Yeah,
and if that's free and lovely and it's fluid and beautiful, that's anyone's dance. A dancer just might be doing that at 1,000,000 miles an hour, but really they still want to have that freedom and flow even when they're doing that.
Yes.
It's just expansion of it in a way.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know about yourself as well, but sometimes it's very lovely to work with dancers because generally they're quite body aware and very interested and invested in their bodies. And then on the flip side, because we're so used to making shapes that the choreographer has wanted for us, we don't necessarily feel how we've got there, or we create the shape, maybe not with the path of ease or the path of least resistance. And I think as well, when we use mirrors a lot, we end up being so visual that it's then, if you take the mirror away and go, can you feel that shape or that position, and it's almost like floating to it your own way, as opposed to, right, we have to be here on 8, and it might not be with a nice movement of the thorax, but you can hit the right position. And I know sort of when I first was doing my flow motion model training, again, I would hit the shape and I was like, yep, there it is. And any of you flow motion people out there, I'd be like, yes, I'm in right suspension, this looks amazing. But was I actually feeling how my body got there? No, but I got there. And I was probably jamming my joint into the position, but it was like, there it is.
There it is. Yeah.
I hadn't actually gone through the process of feeling how I got there, or what were my areas of resistance for me getting there. And, I would have moved more into my positions of ease and then not moved around my compensations, and then that just sets itself up for more compensations.
Yeah, that's so true. And you don't know, because it's because when you're shape based, you don't realize the pathways that you take to get there. You're just interested in that, and every shape that you go to without knowing its journey becomes just another distortion.
Yes.
And so it's such an interesting kind of thing to say. By the way, I love that head thing there. I was like, wow, I'd love to have seen you on, the West End doing those things. But wow, and so talking of jealousy much, it's also, but anyway, but it's so interesting. And I used to dancing in ballet and everything like that. The mirror. And then when the mirror is gone, which basically, when is the mirror taken away? When you're there on stage, that's when they take the mirror away. Thanks. And it's just like, and then instead of the mirror, what have you got? An audience, it's just like, and that's when you're supposed to be feeling it. It's like, oh my God, no wonder there's so much also fear and terror around performance and all that kind of stuff, because you don't, it's a completely different environment, psychological, and all. It's such a. I mean, I think this could be a whole other topic. I think we've actually just cracked open, in the last few minutes, some really interesting future ones as well. But I think it's such an interesting one.
Well, I'm really looking forward to having some more episodes of our visual podcast.
Exactly, that's what it is. I mean, we could have done so many things. Let's make it a visual podcast. We really made that decision.
Well, we can hopefully sort of use our experience to, I think for myself, I know this is where I'm coming from and you're the same, but almost help dancers not have to go through this. And I sort of think, gosh, if I'd known a lot of this back then, I would have had a very different journey. But then obviously our journey is our journey.
without that journey, you wouldn't be having this conversation. You wouldn't be in the position to do it. Oh, it's perfect. But yeah, I think it's going to be. I'm really excited about doing some more of these, and yeah, and finding out what that next one could be about. I'd be really interested to, as you're saying, to find some topics. I think this is really nice. So thank you so much for that story about it. It's lovely because as having this chat before, knowing that there's certain things that we're working on, that there's some similarities, but then it's nothing like actually knowing sort of the narrative through it to realize a bit more, because I think it's always when you're working on these things and you're trying to do things maybe a little bit differently or whatever, there's very personal reasons for it, and
I really I'm very excited as well from sort of having such a cross platform as well. So you have such a strong classical background, and I know myself, I sort of couldn't wait to hang up my ballet shoes. I found it quite a struggle in my body, and again, maybe I wouldn't now so much, but I know I'm all about musical theatre and jazz, funk, hip hop and heels and that kind of thing. So hopefully the message we have can really go out to quite a broad audience, and because it's it's a real passion of mine that the dance world, all genres, just don't have the support that the athletic sporting world does.
They don't. It's so true, and it's what I think. What's an interesting thing is that without that support and without that level of money, maybe the support can be some conceptual support. And we can't give you anything else but some really great concepts. But the concepts themselves. This is what I find talking with you and just also how much a change of concept as the start of something is going to determine so much of it. And just to know that something's possible means that you can walk through it.
Yes.
And if you without that knowledge, then it's like you keep doing the same old thing. So sometimes it's just that little switch is necessary. So I think that's so important.
And I think to give you the sort of autonomy over your own body and allow you to know that you are in control and your destination for your body is your own.
That's a really good point, isn't it? That I think, and some of the ways that I discuss with dancers as well, it's that it doesn't matter what someone tells you, it's up to you to feel it, and then it's your choice whether you do something or not. And to make the choices from an informed place, and that informed place is the information your body's giving you at that time. If it's stiff, if it's sore, if it's hurting, it doesn't matter who's doing it to you. Chances are they probably don't want to hurt you, but they do want you to improve. They do want you to do that thing. They do want you to get on. They do it. But if it's hurting you, then you're not going to be able to do it anyway. And so if you can recognize it. So sometimes what I often teach is like, you go and do what they're doing, but if you do this first or whatever, you'll have saved yourself.
Yes.
They won't even know that you're doing something else that's just slightly, but making it safe for you. And then you can still able to achieve that thing. And I think that's it's just in that an injury happens in a second.
Yeah.
But you've been preparing for it for a long time,
That's really good. Yeah, absolutely. And even those, the non-traumatic injuries. So, and I think they're the ones I see more often than not, actually, in the non-traumatic ones. Obviously mine was traumatic, as was yours. It was an incident. Yeah. But if my control had been different, that may have not been the end point. But most of the injuries I see are repetitive strain muscle injuries, posterior ankle, anterior hip, low back, those kind of things, which can all be avoided.
All avoided. And I think that is if that's a concept to get behind, it's that you can avoid it by the preparation and the awareness of your body in that moment. And that's the accountability. Then that becomes your choice then of preparing it, going, not what someone else is saying. You can start to read it, and it's that body reading that's so important. I think we're both really wanting to get out there as that information.
I know at the start when I work with full-time dancers here, the first chapter literally is, if you choose to go into the world of dancing, teaching, choreography, performing, this is how you get your money. So do you not want to invest in this thing?
Yeah, you might want to look at investing in it.
It's not like, you know, you have a set of tools or you've got a car or a piece of machinery. This is your machinery. So put the investment in.
Understand it.
Understand how it works.
Understand it. Understand how it works. And
understand how yours works, because yours will work differently from yours.
Yeah.
You know, how your hips and pelvis move will be slightly different from mine.
That's so true. Then it's that thing of in a class. I remember in classes where the teacher would always say, you know, this correction's for everyone, but they'd only give it to one student over and over again. So it wasn't in that sense, you know. And so you've got to. And so what can often happen is you get further and further away from, you know, the student that's getting the correction is adaptive to their body. They continue to improve, whereas everyone else is trying to interpret it, but because it's not for them. You've got to find your interpretation of what that is, you know, to make it safe and to make sure. And I think that's a really specific thing there, is that I think what we're talking about in that sense of these tools to allow a dancer to be able to work it out for themselves, so that an instruction can be adapted, you know, that it doesn't have to be slavishly replicated. That's what leads to the problem. Someone getting it up like this, and you do that and you do that. Your body's not that shape, and that's it. But if you can go, they're saying that, and this for me it would mean like this. You know?
For sure. All right. Well, I can't wait till our next visual podcast.
Our next visual podcast. It's been such a pleasure. Thank you for having me on the show, Sally.
Yeah, pleasure, Zach. And I hope all of you have enjoyed it, if you've been listening. And we will see you again very soon.
See you again. Cool.
You never know, we might be able to do one in person one time, Zach.
Oh, that'd be amazing, wouldn't it? Amazing. Well, one in Melbourne, one in Sydney. We'll have a biannual sister city, something.
Yeah.
I'll come up. You know. Rehab Festival of Light. I think that's what it is. Yeah. Cool. Cool. Well, thanks so much, Sally. It's been an absolute pleasure. Really looking forward to the next one. And yeah, cool.
I'll see you soon. Bye, everyone.
Bye. See ya.